Hello everybody, this is a fun video that I thought of as I was rifling through some of my old videos, trying to kind of get back into the flow of BookTube, and I noticed that one of my most watched videos are my tier ranking videos, specifically my Malazan tier ranking videos, and it's been almost exactly a year to the day. I finished Crippled God on September 12th, 2021. Now it is September something close to that. What is today? The 16th? As I record this. So almost exactly a year to the day that I finished the Malazan book, The Fallen. And so I thought I would do a new tier ranking to see if my thoughts have changed after a year of being outside of the world, but also even more than that, see what has stuck with me. When I look back on the series, what do I think of? Because of course, I'm human, so the details of every single storyline in these books definitely fades away as you have been away from it, as any book does. And so I'm curious to see if my thoughts change about the series overall. So I tried not to watch my tier ranking of the Malazan Book of the Fallen so I wouldn't know exactly where everything is. So I don't know exactly how this is going to go. First, at the beginning, I should say spoilers for the Malazan Book of the Fallen. However, I will try not to spoil anything past the book that I'm talking about. So for example, when I'm talking about Gardens of the Moon, I will try not to spoil something from The Crippled God. So if you are at book 7, you're at Reaper's Gale, you can at least watch most of this movie, and please do. It's always great when people watch. Obviously that helps with the analytics, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to do. If you haven't watched my other tier ranking video, obviously, I've changed this to be sort of the magical tier in the Malazan world. So Elder Gods on the top, then Ascendant, Imperial Mage, High Mage, and Squad Mage. I am also, to keep the integrity of this tier system, I am only allowed to put one book in the Elder God category, and I'm only allowed to put one book, or I have to put one book, I should say, in the Squad Mage category. So, again, remember that I'm comparing these with each other, not necessarily with every fantasy book I've ever read. So there is going to be a Malazan book in the Squad Mage. If you ask me about it, I'll probably still say it's a great book, but I have to choose one, again, to make this a worthwhile exercise. So with all of those caveats, as Alan would say, let's get down to business. First up, we're going to do this in order. So the Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson is going to be the first one that I do. Now, I really enjoy this. As most readers, the first time I went in, it took me a long time to sort of get into the flow of Erikson's writing style. But looking back on it, Gardens of the Moon is a very memorable book because it introduces you to the world. It's got some really interesting character. I love the Phoenix Inn 5 and their sort of hangout and silly kind of almost Ocean's 11-like tete-a-tete, I guess. And it's the most simple story-wise, actually, which I know some people who may start this will be intimidated by that. Don't be intimidated by that. I think this is going to be a high mage for me. That might rise a little bit in my mindset. So let's just move on to Deadhouse Gates. This is the second book, obviously. We go all the way to 7 cities, and the Chain of Dogs is obviously the center of this. So this is the first strongly military aspect of the series, and that's what I remember it for. Well, I remember it for Coltane, right? The character of Coltane, sort of the hopeless military romantic who's doing the right thing, but no one is helping him. There's some really in-depth criticism on classism, especially with the refugees, and there's some really cool fight scenes, or battles, I should say, where the sappers are hiding in the dirt and all kinds of stuff like that. However, and this is the Felicin storyline. Ooh, that's also very good. Okay, so all that to say, Deadhouse Gates is probably going to be Imperial Mage or High Mage. I'm going to go ahead and put that in Imperial Mage because of the things I just said. I think these two things, Gardens of the Moon and Deadhouse Gates introduce what the series is going to be. You are going to get highly personal crises that lead to large decisions, which I think Gardens of the Moon really shows you in all of its characters from Crocus to Whiskey Jack. Number 3, Memories of Ice. Memories of Ice is tremendous, and I've said often that if you don't feel like you can get through the huge 10-book series, like you can read these first 3 as a trinity, as a trilogy of books, because they have all the elements of the books. Now, I think those elements get better as the latter season or series goes, but you can get all that with Memories of Ice. I think the Mab storyline, actually, more than anything, has just infected me in that viewpoint of parenthood, and I think it is immensely powerful. On top of that, Capustan is an amazing battle sequence just on its own. Ithgovian and his struggle. So this kind of brings in all of those elements I talked about with the 1 and 2. And this is, spoiler alert, the best books I think in the series are those that combine those 2 elements. The military aspects and sort of these deep personal choices. So Memories of Ice is definitely up there. I'm going to put it in Ascendant for now. It's going to be up there for the one I'm going to put in Elder God. And we'll kind of see if I get to another book I have in my head that I really, really love, if that's going to overcome it. Next up, we have House of Chains, which I really overall enjoy, especially our introduction to Karsa, that long beginning portion with Karsa I think is just fantastic. But I've said this before and I'll say it again, the Seven City storyline actually doesn't grab me as much as the rest of the story there. Obviously, there is this hugely sad moment at the end with Felicin and her sister, but I don't know, the beginning is great, but the rest of it has sort of slowly fallen away from me as I get further from the series. And so I think that was Squad Major 4, and I think House of Chains is going to stay there, unfortunately. I'm very sorry, everyone. Midnight Tides. Now, this is going to be high because I absolutely love critiques of capitalism, and I think the Bug storyline is completely about that, right? About this system that maybe doesn't create obvious oppression, but continues systematic oppression, both in a colonial way as far as like foreign nations, but also at home with the workers, and the matriculation up of wealth to the high in society. And not only that, but I think it's just, those are 2 of the best characters, right? Tehol and Bug, fantastic. And like the ending where you figure out who Bug actually is, that he is male, God of the Sea, Elder God of the Sea, just like unbelievable. So Midnight Tides definitely up there for me in Ascendant. And again, when we get to book 10, I'll have to struggle with who's going to be the Elder God, but Midnight Tides would definitely be involved in that. Now, Bone Hunters is next, and Bone Hunters is going to be interesting because while I love the Yucatan storyline that happens in the middle, and I do kind of like the anticlimax of the end of Bone Hunters, this great sort of one too. As I've gotten further along, it's really just Yucatan that has stood with me. And actually, is Bone Hunters the one where Perrin goes all crazy with the god of disease? I can't remember if that was this or Reaper's Gale. I think that proves my point. I did like that if that's in this book. But actually, Bone Hunters is going to go in High Mage. Now, again, it's been a year since I read it. It's been longer since I read Bone Hunters. And in a reread that I'll eventually do, maybe I'll say, what was I thinking? Of course, this is wonderful. But I'm actually going to put it below Gardens of the Moon in my own personal ranking. I know. I'm so sorry. Reaper's Gale. Now, this is interesting because the Patriotist storyline, which you think would work with me, doesn't really. There's the very powerful, in a negative way, sort of sexual abuse that happens around Tehol's former tutor. I'm forgetting her name at the moment. And, of course, the climax of this film with, I think it's Beak, right? The candles going out. Incredibly impactful. But honestly, when I think of Reaper's Gale, I think mostly of the Patriot storyline being a little bit boring is not the right word, but depressing, and sort of felt a slog to get through. That's not the right word. It was somewhat, I don't know, it just didn't feel as impactful, I guess, as I wanted it to be. And for a lot of the time, the Marines are just kind of scurrying closer to the capital, which is good character development, especially for Fiddler, and his relationship with a lot of other people. But for the most part, Reaper's Gale is also going to go in the High Mage category. I'm trying, again, to be very strict on myself. But obviously, again, remember, I like all these books. Toll the Hounds, without a doubt, is not going in High Mage, and it's going up into Ascendant. I have, one of my favorite things I've ever done on this channel is my spoiler review of Toll the Hounds. It's like 50 minutes long. If you have not seen it, please go see it, if you've read the book, obviously. I just adore this book, and I think the themes are so powerful of grief, of the idea of what redemption is, really meaning of life stuff. How do we make amends? How every action that we have in our life has some sort of consequence. How being a leader, it is better to have doubts than to have total confidence in oneself. About addiction. I mean, I think there's just a bunch of beautiful things. So Toll the Hounds is going above Midnight Tides for sure. And I'm going to leave it there with Memories Eyes. I'm probably going to have to come back to this. Now we're on to the big ones. The two that are really one. And that two-ness and oneness is really going to hurt Dust of Dreams, because it really is just a half a book. It's a setup. Obviously, I think most people, when they think of Dust of Dreams, think of two tragic storylines that are brutal to read, but I think really important for the overall idea of compassion and looking on like the least of these, and also the brutality of existence. That'd be the Crippling of Haton and the Snake. Those two storylines are immensely powerful. This is also where the Shake storyline, which began in either Bone Hunters or Reaper's Gale, becomes very interesting, and especially coming off of Toll the Hounds, with so much of that baggage with what Mother Dark has done and what Animator Rake has done to repair that. Being in Carcanos starts to become very, very fascinating. And there's a great reading of Deck of Dragons. So I remember a lot of Dust of Dreams, and I think the power of a couple of those things is actually going to put it higher, I think, than it would be with most people. You know what I'm going to do? I think Gardens of the Move, I'm going to put an Imperial Mage. Dust of Dreams, but at the top of Dust of Dreams. I know it's kind of crazy to put Dust of Dreams above those other two, but as you hear me talking about it, the things that have stuck with me, there's a lot of them in Dust of Dreams. And this is why I'm doing this list again, because I think this is something, when you're done with this series and you're focusing on the high points, you might miss some of the low points that were really impactful on you and your thinking. And that's really what Dust of Dreams has been. Which brings us to the Crippled God. And the Crippled God, I think, is a symphony of themes, resolutions, just like cool shit, and immense world building all in one. I do think it's Elder God, and even I said, I know with Memories of Ice that I'm going to have to think about if it's going to be Elder God or not. And as I even just contemplate the Crippled God, it's still number one in my mind. It is exhausting in the best possible way. Complex, cosmic. Memories of Ice is beautiful and powerful, but it's focused. Somehow, Crippled God is beautiful and powerful with just this universal appeal in so many different aspects, whether it's Cutter coming back to Crocus and not Apsalar on the coast, and finally sort of being content with who he is, whether it is Fiddler realizing that these people are his family and he will do whatever he needs to do for his family, and that's what matters to the adjunct, giving all so that this evil deity really can realize compassion, and that can heal the laughter on the hilltop, even like the Worm of Autumn having a huge motivation at the end. A lot of very impactful deaths. Really, everything about Cryptic God is so important. I don't even talk about Karkanos and the slaughtering of dragons and a singing sword and the idea of finally finding a home for these pilgrims after all these years. There's so much. I cried when I read it. I couldn't read for a couple weeks, which I can't remember a book besides The Color Purple by Alice Walker that has impacted me personally on such a immense level as Crippled God. So let's take a minute just to look at this. I think I'm pretty happy with most of this. So Crippled God is going to be number 1. Number 2 is going to be Memories of Ice. 3, Toll the Hounds. 4, Midnight Tides. 5, Dead House Gates. You know, I'm going to switch this again. I'm putting Dust of Dreams up here and Guardians of the Moon back. Because the Crippling of Haton just broke me. Not just in like a weeping way. I mean, I literally had to put the book down. I went on a walk. I was reading it in a park. And for a half hour, didn't listen to a podcast, didn't talk or anything, just had to walk and sort of soak that in. And it's brutal and horrible, but I think important to hear that story of brokenness, that story of the fallen, we might say. It's Guardians of the Moon, Bone Hunters, Reaper's Gale. I'm so sorry. I know many people are going to be really upset about those two, but it's just the truth. And then 10, House of Chains, I think is still at the bottom. So I feel really good about this list. Let me know what you think, especially if you are not in the throes of reading the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I think if you're reading Malazan Book of the Fallen, go look at my initial ranking immediately afterwards, and that might hold more true to your thoughts. But if you haven't read in a while, or you finished it a couple years ago or a decade ago when it first finished, let me know how this jives with your rankings after several years away from the text. I would love to hear that. Thank you all for watching, and as always, first in, last out.